All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully, everybody is able to see the slides. I am Alon Peoples. I will be your IT support for today for this workshop. I know we have 12:08. We sorry for the delay, just a little bit of technical difficulties. So let's want to go over a couple of rules for this conference for this workshop. So again, if you are on the call itself and you are dialing in via your phone, please mute yourself from your phone because if I mute you, it's going to be very hard to unmute you. I can't unmute you, and there's a whole bunch of extra steps to get you unmuted. So if you're on your phone, please mute yourselves to help minimize the interruptions and things like that. If you want to be recognized, please raise your hands, and there's other ways we could do that. And we'll talk about that on the next slide. So again, we are a Morgan family here. There's not that many people, so try not to talk over each other. If you're getting any audio freezes, it's not the system. It could be your home internet connection. So please, if you have a lot of things that are on your computer at one time, you might want to start closing out those things. So watching YouTube, Hulu, and Netflix at the same time as this meeting, you're gonna get some freezing. And then again, please, again, this is a nice organized family type of event. Please don't get hostile with each other because if you do and you start to become a disruption, I will remove you from the meeting
No,
if there's an interruption. So like how Anthony is now talking over me, I will mute Anthony to the point if he keeps on doing it, I'll kick Anthony out because he's from New Jersey. Okay, but please just understand that, and we've been on these calls for a number of years now. So, if you ever dealt with WebEx and you've been doing it for a while, it's changed a little bit. So, I just want to talk about that. So, again, to the far left, this is your view. On the far left is the way that you could mute and unmute your audio. That's the far left. Then, right next to that is how you mute and unmute your video. Because you don't have a lot of people on this call, it'll be better in a more friendly type of environment if you unmute your video so we all can see each other. So while we're talking, we can put a name and a face, and it could really be similar to a conference here. Um, from there, if you want to see who's also in the conference, just to recognize the name to the face, you can put your show the participants here, and then from there, if you have to put anything in a chat, you can click on that show chat icon right there, and you can type in that chat box. Excuse me. So what they did was they actually move the raise your hand button under the icons button. So that's where you go to find the raise your hand. And they also add some reactions. So within the reaction, and I know I'm going pretty fast here, but they added a turtle and a rabbit. So if me as a presenter, if I'm going too slow and you need me to speed up, if I'm going too fast, I need you to slow down, you can hit either the turtle or the rabbit. That's what those means. But you also have other reactions as we're going through the different presentations. And last but not least, if you do have a question, again, you can raise your hand during the presentation. If you don't want to speak, you can also, there is a question and answer section. And if you want to type in your questions, you can type it in, which separates it from the chat, and then we can ask it during that portion of the presentation. So, with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Todd. Todd, over to you, sir.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for carving out some time to join us today for our second financial workshop. What we're going to do today, I've assembled a panel of folks that are subject matter experts for the topics of discussion today. So as you can see on your screen, we're going to start with some budgeting tips and best practices. We'll go into our processes with internal audit. There'll be some guidance provided for the IRS Form 990 tax compliance. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with a review of some of the bylaw and constitution compliance measures that govern the association. We're going to do, I guess, as you'll see throughout the presentation, a little refresh of some of the rules that guide the association. And as we extend this information to chapters, we know that there's some uniqueness all the time with chapters in the way that they are operating. But we are here to share, any type of ideas and/or answer any challenges that you may want to pose to the panel as we go through the presentation. So at this point, I'd like to yield over to our Madam President, Phyllis Davis, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Todd. Good morning, Morgan alumni.
Good morning.
Good morning, Phyllis.
How are you guys doing today?
We're doing good.
Super.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to start out in talking to you about the strategic plan, which is our goals and objectives for how we want to proceed in building a stronger association and in helping the chapters so that they can be successful. And in doing so, we as an association and part of the university will be successful in supporting the students, our fellow alumni, and the university. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is our vision. So this is the first time in the history of our association that we've actually created a strategic plan that's a 5-year plan to help us to grow as an organization, as well as making it known to all alumni, our students, and the university as a whole, what we are trying to accomplish and an established plan to guide us. So in doing that, we created a vision. So as you can see from the slide, I can't see the slide, but I'm telling you what I know about the strategic plan, is that our job is to inspire and to motivate all alumni, as well as any friends or those who are interested in the excelling, the accomplishment, and the legacy of Morgan. So we have a very simple vision, one that if your friend or family member or fellow alumni asks you, you could answer, this is our vision. So our goal is to bring all alumni on board, all family, friends, anyone who is going to help us to accomplish our goal, as well as supporting the university. Our mission, which we've always had a mission, we simply revised and tweaked and made it much smaller. The original mission was maybe almost 2 to 3 paragraphs. So we've made it more succinct and putting what we want to do in support of the university, the students, and our fellow alumni. So very simply, we want to help them, the university, in any challenges, in any way through contributions, donations, whether it's your time or treasures to the university. We want to help recruit students, potential students, to attend Morgan. And we also want to ensure the legacy and the prominence of Morgan continues. So pretty much that's our mission in a nutshell. And then our core values, some of our core values you'll find based on the new Morgan strategic plan, which was released recently, I think last month or the beginning of that quarter was released. We've come up with core values as well, to which I'm pretty sure you're seeing the slides. I won't read them to you, but loyalty and pride, diversity, excellence, integrity, and tradition. And you can see where each of those, what we've put. So while we want to, I'll talk to a few of them. In tradition, while we want to keep tradition, it's because it makes us who we are, and it gives a bond to all of us. When we come back to homecoming, when we attend events, that's common to every alumni member. But we don't want traditions to hinder us from embracing new ideas, innovation, and just bringing a new energy and synergy to Morgan and helping us to grow. When we talk about loyalty and pride, we want all alumni to have a sense of family, a sense of dedication to what we as a Morgan, as a university, as a fellowship, socially, networking, all aspects of Morgan. We want our alumni to feel loyal and be proud of what we're accomplishing as an association as well as a university. So those are two that I will talk to. The others you can see what we have there. And for our goals are very simple, easy to accomplish because they aren't broad in nature, but they're necessary goals for us to get to where we want to be based on the 5-year plan. And so when you actually see our strategic plan, you'll see what the objectives are for each goal. And these 4 goals of communication, membership, outreach, and financial, these goals were identified by the alumni through a survey that was given out to all alumni and feedback we received. Based on the feedback, we narrowed it down to these were the items or the areas of interest that were most presented to us during the survey. So in a nutshell, our goal is to listen to the alumni, to support the chapters, and to make sure we're all successful in meeting the needs of the university, the association, and the students. Do I have any questions? Okay, hearing none, I appreciate that you're attending the training today. I hope you find it useful and it supports you. And I also want you to know that we're always here for you, the financial team, the executive committee, and all those on all the committees under the association. So if you need our help, just call and we're there to support you. And thank you for being here today and have a good day. Todd?
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you carving out time while you're on the road to give us some opening remarks and some guidance. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. The first topic we're going to cover is budgeting compliance. Next slide. So if you look in our, no, go back one, there you go. In our Constitution, Article 11, you'll see the duty of association officers. So this really gives us a little snapshot of what my role is, some of the committees that I steer, and then the other committees that I'm actually a member of. And you'll hear a little bit from each person today in regards to each one of these functions. Last year, I described our budget proposal as conservative. It really was a path forward as we navigated through some uncertain times, the pandemic. We really looked to reduce our revenue projections in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we also tightened our belt on expenses. The good news is that it allowed us to end the year with a healthy association balance. When I took office, we pretty much reinforced the collaborative budget process with inclusion of the executive board and the finance committee members. We do this prior to presenting the budget to the board of directors for vote. The real goal was to sustain transparency. The association budget really helps us achieve 4 basic goals. We restore trust in our members. We create economic opportunity for students. We implement smart growth policies, and promote Morgan State University as a leading HBCU institution to grow the future and lead the world. The budget planning process really is not determined in a vacuum, but instead it's guiding us by what Phyllis just mentioned, the mission, vision, and core values, and then the long-term goals of the association and the current administration. So the objective of sharing some sound budgeting practices and tips is to empower chapters to develop or improve their processes and emerge with a pretty comprehensive planning framework. Um, so that's really what's driving today's workshop. Next slide. Okay, so um, some tips in budget preparation. Normally, I sit down with our executive director and we go through our performance from the year prior. We look at the projections and cost estimates of expenses for the upcoming fiscal year, and we start moving money around to cover our expenses and give some good assumptions for the revenue that we expect. But here are some good tips. One, you know, use a template. You want to kind of begin with a general template, and it really should define your main revenue sources, um, and contain some of the basic expense line items such as like chapter membership dues. Maybe you have some printing costs. Um, Obviously, there would be some office supplies, and then maybe university support, scholarships, student donations, gala tickets, etc. Um, you can build out the line items in greater detail as you continue to develop your budget, but keep it predictable and simple, and this will kind of give you a good start. Um, Minimizing the line items. You want to avoid adding too many line items or making them too specific, because this can cause the budget to become overly complicated and lengthy. It would also reduce the flexibility you have in allocating funds and costs throughout the year. So you want to have some flexibility there. So don't make it too specific. Um, Budget by month. Now, you want to definitely use a format that allows you to budget your activity per month of the fiscal year, rather than on an overall annual basis. This is really going to help you track your monthly progress accurately and foresee any realignments that may be needed earlier, um, so that you can reallocate funds or repurpose funds and plan um, for some of the fundraisers, or and also it allows you to focus a little more on the shorter time periods, which can help break down specific activities that will occur, within a month. So, again, you want to make sure that you account for special events, one-time costs, etc. So budgeting by month is just a better way of tracking your costs and your revenue. You want to create an annual total. So you'll see on my reports every quarter when I present to the board, it includes an overall annual column, which each month rolls up into, and then there's the budget line on a year-to-date basis. So you kind of get a snapshot of how we're impacting the budget as we're moving through the fiscal year. So having the overall view along with the month-to-date view kind of allows you to measure your progress against your overall goals as you move through the year. The next one is accounting for inflation. So you definitely want to use the prior year results of your operating budget as an estimate to begin from, right? So that should really be your starting line. Um, in many instances, you want to account for inflation, which is roughly around 3%. So when, if you're creating, and most chapters don't have multi-year budgets, but if you do, then, accounting for the inflation on each line item over the year will, help manage the fund expenditures, um, as you're going through your performance for as a chapter. Um, you also want to consider your fixed and necessary costs first. So, you start with the fixed costs, right? What you already know. Um, Regardless of what the activity level is going to be throughout the year, you need to cover certain costs. So that could be like Fidelity bond insurance. You may have, you may be using PO boxes for members. Maybe you have some software that you're using, so there are some licenses that you would have to renew. Um, so, or at the very least, you might be having like refreshments for meetings. When you gather your chapter members. But you want to have those fixed costs and start there, and then build in the variable costs, right? So this would be kind of a list of nice to haves, right? And then you can add that into your budget um, if your projected funds left over at the end of the year allow you to now add to some of the nice to haves, right? So the budget again is always a work in progress, but with that flexibility, just allows you to build as you move through the year. Divide your annual costs out by month. I think I've kind of talked about that a little bit, but you want to divide the annual amount by the number of months that are left in your fiscal year. That will allow you to arrive at your monthly amounts, right? So just simple math to keep you on track. Account for timing and consistencies. You want to consider seasonality and timing when revenue and expenses will come in and out, such as for your events. You may have some annual revenue drives or um, some fundraising, holiday gifts, etc. So you want to make sure you understand the months that may have the more revenue coming in or more expenses going out, so that you can pay certain expenses when you have the cash or or reserve enough cash to cover those expenses later. Okay, so definitely account for the calendar and the timing and consistency. Use pre-populated templates. You can create tools such as like general templates to help develop some estimates for areas where the revenue or expenses are consistent and repetitive. So an example of that might be say for travel, right? You guys may be attending certain events throughout the year. You could put in a dollar amount for what the travel fare estimate could be. Just a rough number. Lodging, that's what would go with the travel. Per diem, if you're covering food, while people are on travel. And then like transportation, could be like Uber, taxis. These things would allow you to quickly, calculate the trip costs throughout the year. That's something that we had to build into our budget as our Madam President started attending the MSUAA and other events that we have to have a presence at. And lastly, you want to calculate dependent line items from known costs. So use some known values to budget for other related estimates. So if you're having an annual fundraiser, what's the cost? You can create kind of in Excel like a venue tab, and then you would kind of know, you want to list like, okay, the location of, where the venue is going to be, what the catering costs would be, what it would cost to have the tickets printed, security, and then as a percentage of all of these costs, you'll know the overall expenditure, right? So that'll be known, and it'll allow you to kind of calculate some of these dependent line items. Next slide. So just real quick, some budgeting tips because I don't want to get too long-winded. Determine your timeline. You can read, through the slide, and see that you should set a target date, for your board approval. We have presented the 2021 proposed budget to the board of directors during our June meeting. Again, allow some time for each step and for review and discussion. As I stated earlier, this should be a very collaborative process, nothing in a vacuum, and you can get a lot of input from your members. Agree on your goals. Prioritize and set your delivery goals, set your chapter financial goals, and clarify annual goals from your strategic plan. Understand your current financial status. So you want to review your expenses compared to the budget for the current year and your income. You want to also analyze and understand any variances that may impact the budget throughout the year. However, if need be, you can come back and repurpose funds. That's where the flexibility should be, to your advantage. Agree on the budget approach. That is probably the one thing that should be first. You want to agree on the approach, who's responsible, what role, who's going to be making the decisions, how those decisions will be, voted in, out, and or approved. Agree on how much uncertainty can be included. You're going to always have some unknowns, but you don't want to have too many. So just try to minimize or mitigate that. Develop a draft and expense budget. So this is, again, just kind of a precursor to establishing your proposed budget before you present it to your board members. Next slide. Again, first was develop a draft expense budget. Now you want to develop a draft income budget. Most of how we raise money is through memberships. So, this should be a pretty simple step right here. Review the draft budget. Make sure that it's going to meet the goals of the chapter. Discuss any assumptions, and then make adjustments based on your capacity to match your income and expenses, because at the end of the day, those two numbers should be at parity. Approve the budget, present to any committees as we present our budget to our finance committee before we present it to the board. And then before we present it to our executive committee. So, make sure that you are inclusive with any committees, and then present, to the ultimate leadership body for approval. Document your decisions. This will allow you to go back and see how you arrived at, certain decisions to allocate funds or make assumptions, and then implement the budget. Actually assign some management responsibilities, incorporate them into however you're holding your accounting systems, whether it be paper or maybe you're using an application. And then you want to make sure you're always in a position to monitor and respond to the changes as needed throughout the fiscal year. So those are just a couple of tips that would allow you guys to really have a sound budgeting process. And at this point, I'll just open it up for any questions. Okay. If there are no questions, and again, you can always put some questions in the chat, as Alon explained. We're going to move forward. Next up will be we'll be discussing the internal financial audit compliance process presented by Ms. Oprah Martin. Oprah?
So yeah, I changed my device around so I couldn't see. Good evening, good afternoon. Everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm actually doing double duty at the moment, so I'm in two things at one time, but it's all good though. So my portion of, well, let me introduce myself. My name is Oprah Martin. I'm a graduate of the fall 2014 class at Morgan State University. I'm also a life member of the Alumni Association. And this part of the presentation is the internal financial audit and compliance. Next slide, please. So the articles, let me turn this down. So the duties as an association committee, section 7, audit committee, will concur with the concurrence of the board of directors. The president appoints 3 members of the association to serve on the audit committee. The audit committee will conduct the internal audit of all financial records, all financial records once a year and will report at the homecoming meeting. An additional audit may be conducted as directed by the board of directors at the end of the treasurer's term of office. All audit reports will be presented at the semi-annual meetings following the completion of the audit. I was trying to read over the words. Next slide, please. So, best practices. As the financial audit committee chair, this is the process that I follow. So, internal financial audit process. Have all financial records accessible. Accurate bookkeeping is a must. If your books are not correct and we come, say, like you ask for help to do an audit and your information is not there, then, and there's things that are missing, then you have to go back and find them. And then you have to reconcile them to make sure that they're correct. Select which months to audit. You can use 4 months to audit. To select 2 months where there was an abundance of income and 2 months where the income was moderate or low. The next steps after that. So basically, with that being said, so what, say like you do maybe a fundraiser or something that you take in a lot of money, say like for due season, if you collect dues from your members. So if you know that in a certain month that you receive these dues, or whatever donations that you give for your chapters, make sure that you make copies of checks, write everything down on a log, make a copy of the log to take to the bank. And you're supposed to do that for every month or every, however your cycle is for your fiscal year, but to make sure that they are in a folder title for that month. Next steps, cross-reference deposit slips against bank statements for the month that was chosen for the audit. Please make sure that they match. If they don't match, then there's an issue. Cross-reference financial logs and checks that were received to be deposited. Before you make any deposits, any whatsoever, please make copies of deposits and of the days that you get them. And then 3, reconcile any financial discrepancies such as any overages or shortages. So I can say that being the audit committee chair, I did, find a discrepancy. It was a small one, but that was the discrepancy of the bank. So I would rather for your chapters to have a discrepancy with the bank than to have one with yourself and your chapter. And then all financial documents should reflect what funds are received and deposited. Please photocopy any and all of your records. But most importantly, everything should match perfectly from every deposit slip to the actual chapter ledger to all funds that were spent for the chapter. Please make sure that you have a paper trail, because without a paper trail, receipts, documents, whatever it is, those are very important, because if they are missing, then that's a red flag and that's an issue. Next slide, please. Well, my slides are over. Were there any questions? As there being none, thank you so much for your time, and I hope I was able to help some of you.
Okay, thank you so much, Oprah. Next up will be Mr. Ortho Thompson, and he will address the IRS Tax Reform 990 compliance.
Todd,
Yeah.
before we jump into Arthur's part, there was a question in the chat from Victor Watson. Can individual chapters from their own 501c3 people work for the company that do matching funds? Isn't that came from Victor at 12:38 during Oprah section?
Oprah, maybe you want to come back and can you restate the question?
Yeah, so I mean it's probably better. Victor, are you on the line? Can you answer this ask this question?
Are you able to hear me?
We hear you now, Victor.
Yes. There are organizations or friends that will like to support the individual chapter, and will like to provide funds to our chapter, but they work for companies that do matching funds. Can individual chapters form a 501c3, or everything must come through the national chapter?
So the individual chapters should have established themselves as a 501c3. Now I'm just trying to make sure I understand the contributions that you reference are coming from a third party, but that third party has desires to become a chapter, or that's where I'm not clear.
No. I have individual friends that donate to our chapter. They work for companies that match funds. So if they give me $100 toward an event, their companies will match whatever they give. But they will only do individual chapter matching funds. They won't do national matching funds.
Okay.
You understand, or do I need to clarify that even further?
No, I think so the question is, does the company that's matching the individual funds, does that need to go to the association or just to the chapter? Is that the question?
They want it strictly go to the chapter, but if you don't have a 501c3, they will not match you.
Okay, right.
So the chapter that I'm in, we have not formed a 501c3.
Oh.
I was always told that individual chapters can't have a 501c3. So obviously, from what I just heard, that's not correct.
Okay, well that's a good question, and it actually, as we go into the next segment of the presentation, Mr. Thompson's going to go through some different options of the 501c3. So let's just parking lot that question and see if Mr. Thompson will answer that in his segment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Mr. Ortho Thompson, you're up next.
Thank you. First slide, please. Okay. Good afternoon, fellow alum. I'm Otho Thompson. I want to correct anybody that puts an R in my name. It's Otho, not Arthur or Oscar. That's why my nickname is Duffy. And I'm happy to come on this afternoon and talk a little bit about the 990. You just referenced a 501c3. A 501c3 organization is a tax-exempt organization that has gone through the process of forwarding all of their charter documents, bylaws to IRS, and for them to examine to determine that their mission and goal is in compliance with charitable and endeavors, and ultimately they will rule whether or not you are a tax-exempt organization. Each of the chapters perhaps should go through the process of getting their own individual designation as a 501c3. That means that any contributions that a person makes to your organization is tax exempt. So that if they give you $100, then they can take $100 as a deduction from their income tax. So it's a very important designation, and it's one that you have to protect and to align yourself with the requirements that the regulations that IRS has with respect to 501c3 organizations. There are a lot of nonprofits They're 501c organizations, all nonprofits, but a 501c3 is tax exempt, and that's an important designation. And as a tax exempt organization, you and your activities and your finances are subject to public review. And we'll start with the 990. The 990 is the annual report that you file that discloses the income that comes into your organization and how it is dispersed. On that 990, they want to take a look at and they want you to identify the officers and directors of your organization. And they also want you to spell out for them the primary mission of your organization. So it's an important tool, and it's a compliance tool that the government uses to make sure that you're doing charitable and educational kinds of endeavors, and you're not involved with lobbying and or propagating political kinds of information, but that you're truly a charitable organization. And that 990 really sort of opens you up, and it enhances the transparency of all nonprofits, and it makes you focus on your mission. You file your 990, you show where your income is coming in, its sources, and where it's going, and that's all you have to be concerned with. So governmental agencies, regulators, politicians, private citizens will go and examine your 990 to make sure that you are a worthy recipient if they are looking to award grants to organizations that are 501c3. So the 990 is the tool that gives the public and the regulators an opportunity to take a look at how you're collecting and spending your resources. Next slide, please. There are all kinds of, several kinds of 990s, and everything now has been set up electronically. No more paper filing of forms and returns to the IRS. The Form 990N is filed by organizations that have less than $50,000 of income. It's a simple form. You can go to the IRS website. And in fact, the Alumni Association in its drop-down menu has a link to the IRS website where you can go and you can find where you fit in terms of filing for the annual tax return. So if your organization raises less than $50,000, you would complete a 990, a 990 EZ. You'd go online, you'd fill in the information. They're looking for the names of your directors. They're looking for people who are responsible for the organization. And it's pretty simple. You click on and you're done with that report in about 10 minutes. Now, for organizations that have gross revenues of $200,000 and above, a regular Form 990 is required. And if you're pulling in $200,000 and above, I would recommend that you have a tax professional prepare your return. Don't try to do that on your own. It's important that all of the income is properly allocated. And if your organization, like many nonprofits that I represent, own property, there is a whole list of schedules that are necessary. So you need to hire a professional if your annual revenue exceeds $200,000. There is a separate form, 990 PF, that is filed by private foundations. We're not in that business, so we don't really have to worry about that. But the 990 is the public's opportunity to look at your organization, to see how much money you're raising, and to track where it's going, and try to make a determination as to whether or not you're legitimately following the mission that you've set forth for yourself, and to determine if you are a worthy recipient of grant money or funds that they might want to donate to the organization. So the 990 is a very, very important tool. Next slide. So if you're a 501c3, you should file a 990 no later than the 15th day of the 5th month after your fiscal year ends. Now, most of the organizations will follow a calendar year. So at December 30th, 5 months later on May 15th, you should be filing your return. So that's only a couple of days away. And if you're a 501c3 and you haven't gotten your act together yet, then you might want to file for an extension. If your year is a fiscal year and it ends on June 30th, then your tax return would not be due until November 15th. And keep in mind, if the due date for filing is on a Saturday or Sunday or holiday, that filing time is delayed until the next business day. Just like our last income tax was due on April 15th, and that happened to be a Good Friday. And so the actual day for filing the return was moved until the next Monday to April 18th. And of course, if you find that you're running out of time and you haven't got your 990 prepared, you can always file for a 6-month extension. Next slide. There are several places where you can go and get the publications for filling in your 990s. Various charitable bureaus, National Center for Charitable Statistics, GuideStar has all of the 990s, and they will do a return for you for 3 years. And Foundation Research and Foundation Center, they also have forms, but you have to pay a fee for these services that file these returns for you. The best thing to do is if you're pulling in over $200,000 in income, you need to hire a professional, and that tax professional will then prepare your return, and you can rely on that to be accurate and to support what your organization is doing. Next slide. All of the 501c3 organizations are normally operated and organized for educational, charitable purposes, including such purposes as the making of donations to organizations that qualify as exempt under 501c3. Sometimes 503c3 organizations will transfer or donate money to other 501c3s. But again, all of that is laid out on your 990 so that the public can see that you're actually doing educational and charitable work, as opposed to using the 503 mantra to be involved in political activity or other kinds of activity. So the 990, again, is open to the public. The public has an opportunity, as well as the regulators and other grant making organizations, to look at your record and see how you're performing and to determine whether or not you're a worthy candidate for them to contribute to. Next slide. Okay, if an organization fails to file a return by the due date, what happens? It has to pay a penalty of $20 for each day the return is late. The same penalty applies if you fill in the return and file it on time, but you have missing information. And organizations that fail to file their 990s for 3 consecutive tax years will automatically lose their tax exempt status. IRS will eliminate you as a recipient of tax dollars where people can write off the contributions. Then you've got to jump through a bunch of hoops to go back and get reestablished. And so you never want to have the situation arise where you've missed filing your 990s for 3 consecutive years. And that would mean that IRS will revoke your 501c3 status. You don't want that to happen. And as a corollary, if many of your chapters are incorporated, you're incorporated and you have to file a annual return with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Here in Maryland, that return is due on the 15th of April. Again, it's similar to the 990, and that form, you list your officers and directors, and you show and track the income that you've received. And you also report on any property that you own. Many of my nonprofits own buildings and operate buildings. They're also a 501c3. So we have to account for all of the assets that those organizations own. But as I said, as a reminder, not only is the 990 due on May 15th, but on April 15th, if you're incorporated in Maryland, you have an annual personal property tax return that is due. Now, both with IRS filings of the 990 and with the annual state tax return, if you miss a day, you should promptly get in touch with the authorities so that you can keep your standing with the state of Maryland and with IRS in good standing. All organizations that are corporate organizations in the state of Maryland, there's a list of organizations that are in good standing. If you're not in good standing, then you're not going to be a good recipient for people who want to contribute to worthy causes. So 2 very important things to do is to file annually the 990 and file annually your personal property tax return with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Next slide. As I said before, there are a lot of 501c organizations, but the language from the regulations for 501c3 organizations, they're organized and operated exclusively for religious, charitable, scientific, testing, or public safety, literacy, or educational purposes, and to foster national or international amateur sports, or to prevent the cruelty of children and animals. Basically, you're doing charitable endeavors, and these are things that the government doesn't have to do. So because you as a 501c organization is doing that, the government says, okay, we will allow contributions to your organization to be tax exempt. So it encourages people to support your organization because you get a tax break. But there are also 501c organizations that don't have anything to do with charitable or scientific or educational purposes. And you see there on the slide a list of 501c2, 501c4, 501c5, 6. A lot of fraternal and sorority organizations are 501c7, 8, and 9, and 10, but they're not tax exempt. So that designation of 501c3 is a very cherished designation, and you have to do and operate in such a way as to protect it. And the primary way to protect it is to file your annual returns on time. And if you do that, then people will support your organization, and your organization will qualify for grants and support from other 501c3 organizations. I think that's my last slide. So filings are important. Your annual fiduciary report with the state of Maryland and your annual 990 keeps you in business and keeps your donors being able to deduct as a write-off their contributions to the association. That pretty much ends my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
So Victor, I know you had the original question. So was your question answered throughout this presentation?
Yes, and it appears that we should have our own 501c3 based on all that I've heard. I think it's a great idea. We have companies that are willing to support us, only the individual chapters, not necessarily Morgan State University National. So this will encourage us to get our own 501c3 and work on it immediately.
Yeah, that would be the best route for all of the chapters is to separately incorporate, and you protect yourself by incorporating, number one. When you're a corporation, then the individuals who are involved with the activities are not personally liable if you say you had a dance, somebody got hurt, and therefore they're looking for somebody to sue. Then they're suing all the members of the chapter. You want to incorporate to give yourself that protection, and then you want to put together your bylaws and a conflict of interest package and all of your documents to demonstrate that you are following what 501c3 organizations doing. You're doing charitable, educational kinds of activities, and you should be allowed to be designated as a proper recipient of the 501c3 designation. And so then individuals who contribute to your organization would be able to write off those donations to your chapter. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Aaron, you had a question in the chat. Were your questions answered?
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were originally told, I was told that the chapters that we formed were 501c3s. And when we went to the bank, they were like, no, you're not. So this is good information to get. So we'll, creating the 501c3, is there a recommendation for people to help us with this situation, help us to form the 501c3? Yeah. Would the Alumni Association be able to help us form the 501c3?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Also.
There's several routes to do that, and probably, Todd, I should talk with you and the board about whether or not the chapters are considered as wholly owned subsidiaries and would be reporting all of their income through to you and that might qualify them. But there are a couple of alternatives, but I think I need to discuss that with you. But it's my belief that separately chartering each one of the chapters and filing and being a separate corporation gives you some additional protection for your activities because you're holding fundraisers, you're doing dances, you're craft feats, and so on and so forth. You've got liability questions if someone is injured at one of your affairs. So if you've got a corporation, then you've got that layer of protection that will protect the individuals from personal liability. So I think that's something probably, Todd, we need to talk about offline. But I think as a practical matter that each one of the chapters should look into being a corporate entity to give them that layer of protection and then pursuing individually a designation of 501c3 for the chapter.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and we will talk about it offline, Duffy, and come up with. I guess we'll present it to the executive committee to make some recommendations in terms of resources to support chapters that have a concern in this direction. So
yeah, I would ask if you go that direction, if you could help us make sure that we're uniform in filling out the forms and understand what's really necessary, because it would help.
Okay, absolutely. And then as Duffy mentioned, we do have a link on the website that takes you to the IRS website and kind of walks you right through the process of completing the 990. But and to your concern about the establishing the 501c3, we will definitely reach back out to you guys and extend some support.
Thank you. They when I reached out to the IRS about the 990 form, they told me I wasn't a 501c3 and they didn't recognize us, so I couldn't fill out anything while we were there. So
Right, and then to your members, you have to let them know that any contributions, donations that they are making, that you guys are not tax exempt.
yeah, we
So
did that.
yeah, so that is a responsibility of the chapter to provide that communication. So okay, great, excellent. Any other questions?
We have a couple of hands raised. I mean, Deborah, I accidentally lowered your hand, so you go first before I forget.
Thank you, Lon. My question was for Duffy. You talked about the filing of taxes, and that's if you were incorporated in the state of Maryland. So, are the individual chapters incorporated up under the National Alumni Association, or are we incorporated in our individual states?
Well, that's something I'll have to discuss with Todd offline. I'm not sure what your corporate structure is. There is a possibility that, well, I do know that the National is a 501c3. And you may come under the umbrella of the National as part of what the National does and chartering separate chapters around the country. And you may qualify, but I really would have to look into the details of how the Alumni Association is set up and how it sets up its charters and the relationship between the national organization and the separate charters. I do know that you follow the same protocols, bylaws, et cetera, but I'm not sure what your organizational structure is that potentially could give you umbrella protection, an umbrella designation as a chapter, but I really don't know.
Yeah. So to that, Otho, they are under the umbrella of the National Association, all chapters. And if there is a discrepancy within your jurisdiction about your designation as the 501c3 or the tax exemption, then you can reach out to us and we will provide the information to the officials in your jurisdiction to rectify whatever that discrepancy that's not really showing on their end. But you are under, as a chapter, the umbrella of the National Association as a chartered chapter.
Okay, so in that case, we're in Washington, D.C. Would we be responsible for filing the taxes, as Otho said?
Yes, all chapters are responsible individually to file their taxes. So we're not filing, the association doesn't file the taxes and then it covers all the chapters. Each chapter must file their own individual taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Oh, let me just add, but a copy, and that's going to be a good segue into our next presenter. A copy does need to be forwarded to the alumni house because we need to keep record of all chapters and filing the 990. Just a copy. We just need to receive that. So,
Okay.
okay.
Todd, we have one more hand raised. Rosalind.
Yes, thanks. You might have answered the question, how long do I need to keep a copy of the 990? But if I send it to the national, I guess I don't have to keep copies.
Well, I would recommend that you keep a copy for your records and send a copy to us where we will archive it. But I think the recommendation, and also let me know, keep me honest here. Do they recommend the IRS that you keep your tax um, filing for at least, I think it's like 5 to 7 years? You should have it on file.
Yeah, the 5 to 7 is a typical. There's usually a 3-year statute of limitations. If they don't audit you within 3 years on your return, then you're pretty much in the clear. But if they do find discrepancies in that audit, then they can go back 5 to 7 years. So you want to keep at least 3 years worth. And I would recommend that you keep it for 5 years, and then after that you could get rid of it if you haven't been audited. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Todd, that was the last questions that I'm tracking in both chat and hand raised. So over to you, sir.
Okay, well, one apology. Although I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. I did put the R in there, so my apologies. And to everyone, I know we're running a little over the block of time that we carved out, but I did, this is some good information and some important questions. So if you can, just hang in there, we should be wrapping up shortly. Our next presenter is our financial secretary, Mr. Leslie Hannibal, and he's going to cover the chapter's financial compliance. Just a couple of reminders.
Good afternoon, everyone. Leslie Hannibal, the financial secretary. I have a couple of slides that I would like to go over quickly. And it's in regards to financial obligations to the association. The first slide, please. Article 2, Section 3 of our Constitution states that the financial status of board members and chapter members must be verified by July 1st before our first board meeting of the new fiscal year. So this information must be sent in to the association at that date so we can move forward with and know that our members and our chapters are their financial status. Article 11, 4F states the treasurer is responsible for reporting all financial obligations to city, states, and federal government agencies. So that's the main responsibility of our treasurer, to report the information to all state and government agencies. Next slide, please. All to keep the board informed regarding the status of the association financial membership. That is in our Article 11, Section 5. Article 12, Section 8 says the financial committee will be chaired by the treasurer. The president appoints association member to serve on the financial committee with concurrence of the board of directors. This committee shall receive the total coordinated budget proposed annually from the executive director and shall determine the annual budget, reserve funds, and investments of the association, subject to the approval of the board of directors. The committees will review chapter financial data and tax reporting for chapters in support of the association. And I think this lends to the last part of our discussion that we were just recently having, of the support that the committee will try and provide to our chapters. And it basically says tax reporting and their financial data. So as being discussed, we as a committee will get together and see that what is it that we need to do to to provide the support to all our chapters in meeting their financial obligations to their chapters. Next slide, please. One of the things that we would also like to see happen in the upcoming fiscal year is a more oversight from the Finance Committee on our chapters and meeting compliance and adherence to the bylaws of the association. We would like to see the chapters become more responsible for the collection of chapter members and association dues, which should be then submitted to the association in a timely manner. We would also like to see the chapter members and officers' name must be submitted within 3 weeks prior to the first association committee meeting. And also, we would like to have all our chapters be financially solvent. So those are some of the things that we would like to see happen in this new fiscal year. The committee is here to help and move forward in meeting those obligations. And these are some of the outlooks that we would like to see happen in this new fiscal year. If there are any questions I'm able to answer, I will be ready if I can.
Okay, Hannibal, we have one question. I think, Deborah, we have a question from you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Alon. Leslie, why was the date of July 1st selected to send into the association a list of all financial members when that's the beginning of the fiscal year, and that's also we don't meet in July, so it makes it kind of hard for a chapter to get all of their members to pay in June and be able to submit that accurate list to you all by July 1.
Todd, you want to take that question?
Yeah, sure. So what we found is that one of the safeguards that we're trying to have in place when conducting the association meetings is that all folks that are attending are in good financial standing. We wanted to give a few weeks to for the first meeting of the year to have chapters submit that roster. In July, you should at least have a sense of how many members are in good financial standing. We do know that some chapters have some unique methods that they extend to their chapter members to become to pay their dues. But you kind of should be sending out some announcement that your chapter dues is X amount, and you need to also make sure that you're paying your association dues, okay? Because we need to make sure that before we have anyone attend any of these meetings, that they are in good financial standing. So if you send that roster over to the alumni house, then Mr. Hannibal is he is charged with consolidating those rosters to make sure that when we do, say, like a virtual meeting today, we can easily go through prior to starting the meeting and verifying everyone that's in attendance that they are in good financial standing. Because we, at the board meetings, we are, we have certain things that are coming up for vote, and we just need to have some safeguards that that we are operating with folks that are in financial standing, because we've had a lot of folks in the past attend meetings and we had no way of verifying whether they were financially connected to a chapter or they were just roguely attending. So to your point, I mean, because we're only talking about really a roster that needs to be submitted, and 3 weeks prior to our first fiscal year meeting is we felt was ample time for chapters to get that roster over to us. Deborah, did I answer your question?
I mean, to some degree, I mean, it's just, I think what's going to happen is, I mean, and yes, I make it a practice of reminding the beginning of the year, don't forget dues are due, don't forget dues are due, don't forget dues are due. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to get several lists. And I may just be speaking for my chapter, but I know that typically most of the members do not pay in June. Normally we get a rush in our first meeting, which is in September. So what you're going to get from me is July 1, you're going to get the officers, because all of them have to be financial in order to be in that position. And then you may get 5 or 6 members who are actually going to pay their dues in June. And then, so you're going to get that from Washington, D.C. And then come September, you're going to get another list that has additional members added to it.
Right, and that's okay. I mean, if that's the way the chapter is used to operating, so be it. We encourage you to try to get the members, as it sounds like you're doing, to pay earlier for their dues. But just to manage the expectation, let those, if they pay the dues prior to the first board of directors meeting, then if we have that information. And you can send that over, and we can vet that within probably 24 to 48 hours.
Let me answer that, Todd.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Just
Hannibal. Go ahead.
It doesn't matter if you send in 2 lists, because then I'm more than able to scrub the list and verify their financial status. So you sending in more than 1 list is not gonna put a hurt in the process, because I'll be able to scrub the list that I currently have with your prior list. So I'll be keeping records of everything that you send in as a chapter, and as they are approved, they will be come off that list. So on that list will only be non-approved members. Then I will go back in and scrub that list to ensure that they paid their chapter and their association dues. And so scrubbing a list wouldn't be an issue for us.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't want to make extra work for someone, and it just to me seemed that July 1 was kind of unrealistic. But that's just, like I said, that's just coming from my chapter. But if you're okay with getting 2, 3 lists, then I'm okay with sending.
It's not an issue. That is not an
okay. Issue. All right. Thank you both.
All right, Sherry, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to piggyback on Deborah's question. So I'd like clarification on when the first board meeting is.
Normally the board meetings are around mid-month, mid to the 3rd week of that month.
So you said that I want clarification on when the list should be submitted, because it says here the first MSUAA committee meeting. So what date is that actually?
We don't have the, I can get the calendar out and get the date over to you, Sherry, for the September meeting. But I know that if we go back last year, it was somewhere around the 16th or the 18th, somewhere around there. But
so that means that our list should be submitted before September 15th.
before the board meeting, but I'll get that date out
Right.
to all the chapters. Yes.
Well, that answers our question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if you actually look at it, the initial list will come to us by July 1st. And you guys actually have within between that time period and the actual meeting to submit any subsequent names that may have become financially solvent. Um, but if we get it by the first, we at least we'll know whom is already financially solvent at that point. And and as Todd has mentioned, those will be the ones that will be invited to the meeting at that time because they have met the obligations of the association.
Are there any other questions, Alon?
No, I don't see any other hand raises or anything in the Q&A section. So, I mean, my only suggestion, Todd, is that with your bullet 2, and you just probably want to clean up. So if you're saying the MSUAA committee meeting, so if that's your internal meeting, I would say call out that committee meeting, but then add in a bullet for the MSUAA board of director meetings and try to split that out so it gives better clarity of when the list, what type of list you're looking for. So it's like it's an easier, cleaner read for the folks on the line.
Got it.
Okay. That's a good recommendation. We will do that.
So this is the last slide. Any questions? I'm going to stop presenting so I can see everybody.
Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, 3 times. Well, let me first extend a thank you to everyone that was on the panel today. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Hannibal, Ms. Martin, thank you so much for participating and presenting during this workshop. Then I want to also thank every chapter uh, representative for carving out a few minutes. I know we ran over by about 30 minutes, but thank you so much for, chiming in with your good questions. And, we just want to make sure that we're always transparent, that we're supportive, and that if there is a chapter that has any unique questions and or challenges that, they can always connect to the National Association, the Executive Committee, and we will provide whatever supports are available to extend. So with that being said, I won't be long-winded. I just like to say, again, thank you to everyone. Enjoy your Saturday. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next board meeting. I believe that's going to be in June. The date should be June 11th. That is what I was told. So, but we will firm that up and make sure that it gets out to all chapters for maximum participation and attendance. So thank you so much.
A reminder to the chapters that there is going to be another scheduled chapter workshops that is scheduled late July, early August, dates to be followed.
Okay, that's all we have. Enjoy your weekend and be safe out there.
Thank you all. Great presentation. Great information. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alon and Todd. Excellent meeting.